Kind of like, what was your identity growing up and what did you see?
D-Money, you got to go first because, here's why. Well, that too, but seniority. When we get into a hotel room, I'm the first person that gets that suitcase organized and gets it out, all her clothes out of the suitcase and properly placed is this woman right here. So she's got to go first, unloading her suitcase and what she brought into the marriage.
You know those sumo seats that you like get each other in and you like bounce each other around and out of nowhere you'll just go flying. I kind of feel like that's us and how big our sin is. Like, oh my goodness. Like think of it like that. Like if you come into a marriage with a ton of baggage, it's kind of like this sin is packed up and I look like the sumo wrestler. And then if you get too close to me, I'm going to fly you across the room.
That's a good picture.
And so when I was thinking of that picture, I just thought like,
to me, as long as you have humility, you're going to win in marriage because really God's using me to help her grow. And a lot of her past rejection, she was adopted and abused and different things. So a lot of her insecurities, when she's vulnerable with those, instead of me taking advantage of those, I'm trying to help her and love her like Christ loved the church through that process.
Hello and welcome to the Making Marriage Great Again podcast. We have an exciting conversation for you today with an extremely powerful couple. We hope that you are as excited to hear their story as we are. Before we get into this episode, make sure that you hit the thumbs up, the subscribe, and then the notification tab so that you can be notified every time that we drop a new story. We love you. We can't wait for you to hop into this powerful conversation with us. Let's go. Welcome to the Making Marriage Great Again podcast. Today we have two amazing guests with us, some of our closest friends, also our pastors, but more importantly, our friends during this season. Love doing life with you guys. We have Pastor Todd and Denise Doxzon, his wife. They've been married for 24 years.
Come on.
Have two amazing boys, twin boys, which we're going to get to hear part of their story and how they've impacted their lives, I'm sure. We have one that's married, one that's soon to be married.
Come on.
So Zion and Blaze, Zion's married to Taylor, his wife of just a few years now, right?
A couple years,
A couple years, so new marriage. Todd got to do their marriage, so hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit about that as well, what that means to being a father and being a husband and just having that opportunity. And then Blaze, soon to be married. They founded Love Church back in
2008.
2008.
Can you believe that? Yeah.
A journey of starting a church. A newer campus now, getting ready to launch again. So some fun conversations around that. As well as they own a real estate company. Where they're doing just predominantly residential homes and things like that.
Buy and holds, real estate investment.
Cool. And then also, Pastor Todd does football analysis for high school football and color. So we've got a radio voice here as well as a TV face. So this is going to be a ton of fun.
We need a game going on so I can commentate on it.
If he starts calling timeouts just and looking for the hot route, you'll know why.
Exactly.
Also a former NFL player and a lot of different experience through that sport as well. So it'll be cool. All right, let's jump into it, guys. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So we get the opportunity to just share your guys' story of what marriage means to you, what your relationship has looked like. One of the best ways for us to do that is just kind of start unpacking it. We know everybody comes into a marriage with suitcases. You each have a suitcase full of your past, but how does that impact our marriage and our relationships? So maybe for whoever wants to start first, give us the background of like how you grew up, what relationships look like for you. Kind of like what was your identity growing up and what did you see?
D-Money, you got to go first because here's why. Well, that too, but seniority. When we get into a hotel room, I'm the first person that gets that suitcase organized and gets it out, all her clothes out of the suitcase and properly placed is this woman right here. So she's got to go first, unloading her suitcase and what she brought into the marriage, her past.
I think like if you talk about any marriage, you really can't without talking about where you came from, what you were raised like, because it impacts so much of how you are when you first enter into any relationship, let alone into marriage. Two sinners under one roof, you're bound to have some explosions. And today it was really funny. I was at a Bible study this morning, and the picture that God gave me is, those sumo seats that you like get each other in and you like bounce each other around and out of nowhere you'll just go flying. I kind of feel like that's us and how big our sin is. Like, oh my goodness. Like think of it like that. Like if you come into a marriage with a ton of baggage, it's kind of like this sin is packed up and I look like the sumo wrestler. And then if you get too close to me, I'm going to fly you across the room.
That's a good picture.
And so when I was thinking of that picture, I just thought like how faithful God is to teach us what it looks like to deflate those suits, so that we can have conversation. We can be in relationship with one another. But the way that I was raised, I had nobody know the Lord in my family. And as I was growing, I had committed every sin imaginable from the time I was young all the way through when I met Jesus at age 21. And there, God started unpacking for me so much of how much I needed him. And so in those moments of just coming to understand, okay, this sin is weighing you down in this way. You've had this past where people rejected you and abandoned you. So automatically you put up these walls of protect myself and you can only get in this far. And this happened to me, so I can't do this. And I believe this about myself and it's going to impact you this way. And one really sweet thing about when we got married is that we both came to know Jesus before we met.
Yeah.
Which is wild because that's not the case for many people.
Yeah,
true.
And so though I had all this sin, I knew at least one thing. If I went to Jesus with that sin, he would remind me that he's enough for me to like endure whatever it was that we were going through. So as much as the weight of all of my past impacted, and I'll talk about that in a little bit after you share, like whether it be sex before marriage or having multiple partners before being in one relationship forever. I remember our pastor, when he was officiating our marriage, he like held on to my husband and grabbed both shoulders and was like, you're not just saying yes to Denise, you're saying no to every other woman on the planet.
Wow.
And so like when you think of it like that, like that's a whole different story. I can say yes to something that's fun and exciting in the beginning of any relationship. But when you're enduring hardship and somebody else is walking by and you just need a shoulder to cry on, or somebody's looking good, it's hard to say no in those moments. So I remember that moment was super vivid in my mind. And I feel like God used just so many people he peppered in our life to help us kind of overcome sin in those moments of temptation.
Yeah. So good. You bring up a very valid point, and one that most of our listeners probably haven't had the chance to experience. Number one, you guys got this right before you went to the altar. You unpacked a lot of that stuff together before you said I do. So it really was this different moment than so many people get to experience. Now that's our hope for everybody in the position that we're in now. But so many people just don't get that right. Doesn't mean they still can't have a great marriage. Right. They just got to decide, when are we going to put that stake in the ground and say it's time to unpack this suitcase so that we can have that fresh start.
And I would say too, KB, our process has been really good because I think, to me, as long as you have humility, you're going to win in marriage because really God's using me to help her grow. And a lot of her past rejection, she was adopted and abused and different things. So a lot of her insecurities, when she's vulnerable with those, instead of me taking advantage of those, I'm trying to help her and love her like Christ loved the church through that process. Don't always get it right.
And in the beginning, that was easier said than done. Like, in the beginning, your walls are still up because you're in this protective, you're going to abandon me like everyone else mode, And so it was wild just peeling back all of those layers little by little. Yeah.
You think about what you said, like so many people end up using their spouse's weakness as the weapon that they use against them. And especially men end up, I would say both.
I think it's both.
Both get there, but men that have this like type A dominance, I'm going to go out and compete. I'm going to strive to be exceptionally well, a perfectionist mentality, and I'm going to perform at a high level. What's the first thing we look for? The weakness in somebody so that we can take advantage of it. So I'm really looking forward to you guys sharing like the practicality of how you have learned to do that with so much grace. Maybe what it looked like early on and where it's at now. And still falling short so often.
What comes to mind is funny. Even when we first got married, we had a king size bed and we'd be intimate. And then I'd be like, all right, now get on the other side of the bed.
He would put a line.
I'd put a line and they'd be like, all right. And it was interesting because, again, I'm early in this process. Tragically for many years, women was just, I don't know, a product. It was just like, get it done and all right, see you later. So there was this opportunity to grow in what does intimacy look like God's way? And so she was super gracious. She could have been like, idiot, like we want a spoon, we want to snuggle us. Like so it's funny because now we're the opposite. So now it's like she's like, will you get off of me? You're getting hot, or whatever, you're too hot or something. It's like it's funny how now roles have changed. But again, it goes back to humility. She was gracious enough to not make a demand right now. She was praying. A lot of times she would tell you, she'd be in the prayer closet going, Lord, I want to like rock this dude right now. But you know what? You got him. Can you just, as I grow personally with you, can you grow him? And I think that's what it takes, man. It's humility, patience, and continue to go back to the Lord for his grace.
So good. Yeah. And if you guys don't have your pencils out yet, get them ready, because there's going to be so much wisdom that's dropped. Yeah, exactly. We're taking notes over here.
Yeah. It's fun.
Give us your story, Todd, if you could, about growing up, what that looked like for you, marriages that impacted you, what you looked at and said, man, I want to do that, or no, I don't. Yeah,
basics. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I moved here when I was 4, and my parents got divorced when I was 7. Okay. Pretty gnarly stuff that was going down, some infidelity and different stuff. And so I had this rejection issue, very similar. Her parents stayed together, but this rejection root was right there. Identity, didn't know who I was. I turned to athletics to really kind of be the thing that would give me, I don't know, they would accept me. And it's funny because there was, I think back, it's my parents' divorce. I remember I tried out for a basketball team in 7th grade, and the coach said, "You're too small." And it's like ringing in my ears to this day, I'm like, and then I got dumped by this girl my freshman year of high school. So when I look back at, I had to unpack some key things, and that might sound dumb to some of your listeners.
Not at all.
I'm just trying to be vulnerable. Where, the divorce, my dad, mom, they did the best they could.
Sure.
But as a young person, God created family for a reason. And a lot of we get our security through that. So I was insecure. I lacked identity. When he said, "You're too small," I'm like, "I'll show you too small. One day I'm going to prove to you," right? So
chip on your shoulder.
Chip on my shoulder, insecurity, pride. And then the girl dumps me in, my freshman year. And you're like, and again, it's pride. It's rejection. Okay. One day you're going to be like, "I wish I was married to you," And so it's this arrogant pride, insecurity. And that really set the trajectory really for my life. And kind of went cold on a lot of things. Cold on, if a woman's going to hurt me, fine, I'll just use her. Like I'll a complete disconnect of emotion. And so that happened actually all through high school and college. And again, until I met Christ in my truck and in a snowstorm delivering a bag of weed. And it sounds weird for some listeners, but the reality was I grew up in a church. I thought it was for geeks and nerds, people need a crutch. And when I hit rock bottom, got cut by the New York Jets in my truck in a snowstorm, God got my attention. He's like, "You can continue down this road, Todd, but my hands are going to be off." Right. Incarceration, unplanned pregnancy, disease, unplanned, whatever, that's going to happen. Or you can turn and you can just trust me. You can surrender your life. And that was late 1997, you guys. And you've heard the story, but, we're in 27 years. I think I'm in year 27 of my relationship with Christ, and certainly not perfect, as she could tell you, but I'm in process. But that was the starting point. That's what I always tell people that I counsel in marriages. It's like, hey man, I know you don't want to hear the Jesus thing, but I'm just telling you, God made the Word. He made us. He created the manual for life. This is how marriage is going to work the best. And so you're not going to get it right every time, but at least you have like a central area. I just met with a premarital couple, and I asked them, they're both athletes, and I said, "You remember going and playing pickup basketball, and there was no referee there, and some softies calling a foul every second?" You're like, "Bro, that wasn't a foul. Like, come on, like grow a pair, bro. We're playing grown man basketball.
There's no blood here. Like, come on."
And foul. It's like whatever. Well, the picture God gave me long ago is like marriage without the Word of God is like playing pickup basketball with no referee.
Yeah.
All you're going to do is bicker back and forth on what is right and what is wrong.
Yep.
When we submit to the authority of the Scriptures, now we have a referee in our pickup basketball game, and we can have fun again.
Yep.
And so in any event, that's been huge for us in our process.
Yeah. The way we say it is, you can have a good marriage, you can have a better marriage, or you can have the best marriage.
That's good.
That's really good.
You can still have a better marriage by not allowing Jesus in. But if you want the best marriage, follow his playbook, because it's so simple.
That's it.
Simple said, not as easy to do at times. But so you came to know Christ about 3 years before you guys got married. Denise, when? How about for you?
Very similar. In 1994, we met in 2000. No.
You grew up in upstate New York, correct?
Yeah. So I grew up in New York, was raised there, radically saved at age 21, moved to Florida. right then. And then that's where I started following the Lord. So like I got saved right before I left for Florida. I found my biological mom. God dropped her in my lap after I surrendered my life to Christ. And in that moment, that's where discipleship started. That's where I'll never forget. I had this one moment where I went to this class and it was like how to be a wife. And I was like, at least people are crazy. I'm like, wait, what?
Submit.
Like, what?
No.
What are we talking about? And there was a point in the class where one of these women, you know how like the Peanuts gallery voice is just like, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like
Oh
she
my
sounded
goodness.
like
That's
because
hilarious.
she started saying things that I was like, she seriously drank the Kool-Aid. Like,
Yeah, she's nuts.
has she lost her mind? And so she was teaching biblical
That's good.
marriage. And I had never seen, I wasn't raised, by a Christian couple. So I never saw what biblical marriage looked like. I never knew God's word works. And so when they were explaining what it looked like to walk with the Lord, I was just like, y'all are crazy. But then as you take a step of faith and you start practicing God's word, there's nothing greater for a marriage than being willing to operate the way that God's word says a husband should operate and the way that a wife should operate. And that was literally shocking for me.
Yeah.
So coming in at age 21, thinking people were crazy, to then taking a step of faith and being like, okay, there must be something to this because they're all still married.
Yep.
And where I came from, it was pretty wild. So
Yeah.
let's take a look at that and take a step of faith. And so then not even like 6 months later, this guy enters the picture. We were in Fort Lauderdale, actually serving in different capacities
Youth ministry,
there in
yeah.
youth
All right,
ministry.
I want to get to that. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you brought up a really key point, I think, that I want everybody to make sure that they caught on to. You said, I found my biological mother.
Yeah.
So there was something there where you weren't with your biological parents that happened at obviously
Yep.
at birth, right?
That's right. Yep. So
Can you talk about that just a little bit?
For sure.
And how that impacted you maybe and then ended up getting you guys to Florida? Because I don't necessarily know if I know how you ended up in Florida. So I'd love to know upstate
sure.
New York, Omaha, and all of a sudden here we are in Florida.
Yeah, so in New York, so I was adopted. So when I was born, before I was even born, they had set up this surrogate thing between my doctor and 2 of his patients, which was probably not even legal without all of the I didn't even know the full situation when you think about it. But when I look back at what went on, it looked like the doctor set up a mom who had a baby, was pregnant and didn't want to be, and then a couple that couldn't have a baby.
Yeah.
So set them up. I end up being adopted by this couple, again, who doesn't know the Lord. Then when I surrendered my life to Christ when I was 21, God had literally dropped my biological family in my lap. And so I was working at a shoe store, and I happened to search for my biological family's last name prior to this, and I found it, and I kept searching all through the city, all through phone books, trying to find the biological last name. Couldn't find it anywhere.
In New York?
In New York. So when that was all happening,
And I mean, and not great internet at that time. I mean,
oh yeah, no, this is going to City Hall, pulling
Yeah.
out files, looking at all the names, and
And
then
when you said phone book, I was like, people
we don't
don't
even
have
know
Yeah.
what
Phone book, phone
is.
book.
Yeah, it's a paper. Yeah. So then in that season, there was this there's always been this crazy longing in my heart for identity. Right. There's been this desire to know who I am, what my purpose is. Why did they give me up? Did someone die? Do I have siblings? There's just all this question. And with that question comes so much doubt, so much insecurity, so much just rejection issues that kind of pop up no matter where you go.
Yeah.
Obviously abandonment. And so all of that pours into when you're, trying to consider who your spouse should be. And
Yeah.
so
Wow.
no matter what relationship you operate in, you always have this
Yeah.
self-protective mode. But when I met my biological mom, literally her sister was working out in Gold's Gym. Her sister-in-law was doing my roommate's nails. Still never put together any relationship at all. We look almost like twins. Her sister never even figured out that I was related to them
Golly.
at all. Her nephew, my mom's nephew, worked out at Gold's Gym. I worked out with him all the time. We never put together that we were cousins. Like, there was just way too many touch
Wow.
points
Yeah,
of
I
me
didn't know
not
that.
even knowing. My family was like literally under my nose the whole time. I surrendered my life to Christ simply in word. All I did was say, oh my goodness, I'm a sinner that needs a savior. God, please come into my heart. And in that moment, not even in a week, God opened up the door for me to meet my biological mom. And so this is what happened. I was working at 9 West, the shoe store. And this woman comes in, and I had just moved back, literally 2 days before that, from South Carolina back to New York. And as I was in that store working, my boss knew that I had this crazy deal. He's like, come work for me again. I need some help. Okay. I just show up. This woman comes in, wants to buy shoes, and she's like, I'm not sure they're going to match my dress at home. And I'm like, oh, you can return them if they don't match. No problem. And she's like, oh, yeah, okay. So my boss goes back to taking a delivery. I never worked the register. I happen to go up and help this woman at the register. She comes up with this check. You remember back in the day, you have to write out a check, and you have to verify it with your license. Well, that license happened to be the same name that I found on my birth certificate 11 years earlier.
What in the
That
world?
made me go on the search for looking for my biological mom. Well,
I got goosebumps.
It's crazy. And so I'm looking at the check, I'm looking at the woman, and it's a different first name than I found in my records. And I was like, I have to know. This is the first time I'm seeing this name. I searched for 11 years. Like, I have to know who this is. And so I was like, by any chance, do you know a Susan Roldan? And she's like, yeah, that's my sister-in-law. And I like froze. And I was like, what do I do now? I could ruin a family. I don't know what to, I don't know what to say.
Oh my gosh.
And tears just kind of start flowing down my face. And the woman's like, how do you know her? Like, kind of like, how did she offend you? Because clearly something's up. And I was like, and I was like, 21 years ago. And she like drops her purse, everything. She throws her hands over her face. She's like, oh my God, you were adopted. Give me a phone. I need to call your mom. And so she puts it together. And so she literally reaches out to my biological mom. And so then God makes the connection. It's just shortly after I say yes to Jesus as Savior, he's like, everything you ever longed to know, I'm going to give you a little kiss and like let you know how much I care. And I've known this whole time. So he opens the door for me to get to know my biological mom. And then that same day, she found out she was pregnant with my brother. So I have two brothers. And so then that is really what transferred me down to Florida, where I met this guy.
Okay. So that's thank you for sharing that. Like, I've never heard all of this before.
Isn't that crazy? I know.
Wild story. The fact that a driver's license and the same last name lands in front of your face in this moment.
So many weird things in that were the little kisses from God. Like, your aunt was under your nose the whole time. It wasn't time yet. Your cousin you worked out with, it wasn't time yet. Your best friend got her nails done by your aunt-in-law. Not the time yet. The aunt who was in the store with the license for 2 years was divorced from my biological uncle. She tried to change her last name on that license for 2 years, and God kept putting something in the way. Like, the DMV was closed. You're trying to get there on a holiday. Like, just weird, crazy stuff.
Nothing's a coincidence.
No.
I was just going to say, people will say, oh, what a coincidence, and it's not.
Yeah.
God wins.
Miracle.
It's a wink.
How did you get to Florida then? So Denise gets there by this wild story. How did you end up in Florida?
Good question. So my first NFL team was the Jets. Pulled a hamstring, got cut. That's when I came to Christ, hit rock bottom.
Yep. Came back to Iowa.
So I went back to Iowa State to finish my degree.
Okay.
And that's when I was really hitting rock bottom.
Yep.
Came to Christ. Ended up, I got a call from my agent. Ended up going to NFL Europe. Signed with the New England Patriots. Pulled another hamstring, got cut. And then the Miami Dolphins signed me in week, I think, 5 or 6 of the 98 season. So I literally, all of a sudden, I'm a Midwest kid who grew up playing for the KWA Dolphins Pee Wee League. And now I'm next to Dan Marino in the locker room, like playing in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins.
Your dream at this point.
Total dream. So it's funny because the first day we had off for practice, I go and rent a convertible. I go to the beach. I'm like laying out. And some guy comes up. He's like, hey, that's $5 to rent that chair, that lounge chair. And he saw this WWJD bracelet.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, hey, you a Christian? I'm like, yeah, I just came to Christ, man. And he's like, you should come to my church. I'm like, well, I work on the weekends. Do you have anything midweek? He's like, oh, yeah, I'll meet you at our church on Wednesday. I show up, Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale, and I'm like, what is this? It was like, it was a rock show during worship.
Yeah.
There was this like stand-up comedian actually teaching the Bible where I could understand it. I was like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this.
Made sense.
And then, a year later, I started serving in youth ministry. And so D-Money and I met actually at the very first volunteer rally.
Okay.
In fact, I'm getting out of the car. This is the first time I see this woman. I'm getting out of the car. And remember, I'm just coming to Christ. I have a past with girls, all this kind of stuff, and weed and all this stuff. I see her, and we get out of the car, and I looked at my boy, my homie, Mickey, who was my buddy that I was with. I was like, bro, get back in the car, man. No, I can't do this. That chick's way too hot. And he goes, this is great.
Because you're thinking temptation.
Yeah, I'm like, dude,
temptation.
I don't want to. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to get my life right.
Yep.
And he goes,
get back in the car. I love it.
I literally told him, I said, get back in the car.
Get back in the car. We're
But
out.
here's what he challenged me. He said, actually, this is going to be a great challenge for you. What's your heart? Are you here to go serve God and his kids and serve the youth? Or are you looking for chicks? I was like, all right, good call. Let's go. Let's do this. So we go in, and I'm like avoiding her the whole time. I'm like
talking to everybody else except me.
and-
He would like look past me.
Yeah.
So, but over time, we did these group Bible studies and events. We'd go share Christ on the beach and different things. And so within a handful of months, the youth leaders had us serve on this thing called Hallelujah Night, which was like this, what would you call this, babe? Like
alternative
to Halloween.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was like thousands of kids. It was so cool. And they made us be security for the night. So we were forced to walk together and make sure that no kids get out of hand.
Oh, goodness.
So that was our first day. We actually spent just her and I walking around. And then, we were engaged 4 months later, married 6 months later. And
wow.
Yeah, it was just boom. It was God's timing. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in Florida, you guys make this decision to say, okay, hey, we're going to go. What does it look like for you both knowing your pasts and saying, hey, we want to do this the right way? Walk us through how you did that. And maybe the practical pieces and then some of the fun stuff as well.
So good. Do you want the Hawaii story or do you want me to take it?
Well, I mean, before that, like what we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think we made an agreement and we just said, hey, we really want to do this right.
Okay.
But we know how we are, came from our past. We know we're weak, super attracted. At least I was attracted to her. I used to have traps back then. I was hang cleaning. I always say like that's the only reason I lured her in because I like looked pretty good. I have 0 traps right now, but in any event, but back in the day, we super attracted. We were like, okay, we're not even gonna kiss until we say I do on the altar.
Wow.
And that was just
okay,
a
hold
thing.
on, because that is unheard of, right?
Yeah.
But like that was something, and it's completely true. But it's like, wow, how there's so many layers to that. Like, okay, how do you? That's like a baby step. It seems like with couples, like, but that was something where you were like, no, we know ourselves. We have to have some guardrails.
Yeah.
Right out the gate.
And again, everybody's got their own conviction and different things, how they do life. That's the beauty and the tragedy of free will. Like God's like, here you go. Here's my word. You can do whatever the heck you want. It's like,
which we already tried and it wasn't working for us.
I mean, it was just pain and chaos. So we were like, all right, we really feel God's in this. We really feel we're supposed to be together. Let's do this right. Let's not even kiss until our wedding day. And so we would put like certain parameters, like, what was one of them? Like, don't get horizontal with one another. And there were some guardrails, not in religious, legalism, weird stuff, but it was like
just protect
protect us.
Yeah.
So, anyway, you want to tell the Hawaii story?
One of the things I think that's really cool about when you guys are trying to decide who's going to tell this portion of the story is, as the husband, as the male in that position, what a gift to be able to show your spouse that you can have restraint in that, because so often.
That's right.
If you guys make this commitment that we're not going to kiss, we're not going to watch movies past 10 o'clock, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Really, you've got this view into what that relationship's going to look like from a spiritual leader standpoint of how that person interacts. Yeah. Am I protecting this commitment that we made, or am I trying to convince you of just this one time?
And what people fail to realize, people will be like, well, I know I'm marrying them. I'm getting married in 2 months. It doesn't matter. They're my fiance. Well, here's the deal. If you can't practice self-control before marriage, what says you will after?
Wow.
So true.
And so a lot of times it's not just about you and, it's really just about willingness to yield to God's best for your life in that moment. And that the idea of that to me, what, I've been through so much in my past with men, to me that stuck out. Like, this is the man that I can trust. Like I can trust him to lead me because he's wanting to do it God's way. Yep. Totally different than any other experience I ever had with any men. And
safety. I mean, there's just so much safety, which is women crave that safety in so many different areas of their life. And if we can provide that as men, it's like,
and so many
key
women,
to their heart.
Sorry to interrupt you, but so many women that I talk to, like, one of their things that I'll always hear is how bad they want to honor the Lord, but the man just constantly tempts them. And it goes both ways, for sure.
Yep.
Like I love you. Of course I'm going to marry you. And that just you get worn down, And so that was just a huge difference than what I was seeing and experiencing in my past relationships.
Gosh, I love that.
And the mentality was, okay, it's kind of like driving a car. If I put it in first gear, that thing's going to fourth, fifth. I mean, if you have a 6 gears on there, bro, like that's going to 6 quick. And that's just how we do life. It's just like, send it, So we were like, all right, we're not going to do it. Well, we made this commitment. Well, Denise, this is such a wild story. I'm trying to give you the Cliff Notes. Her ex.
You don't need to share that part. Just share the part that happened.
Well, anyway, we're in Hawaii. I think it's actually kind of cool. Her ex invites us to Hawaii, or to her. Well, one of my best friends was in the Pro Bowl in Hawaii at the same time. So I'm like, dude, let's do this.
Let's go.
It was her and I and one of her homies. We roll over there, and I first meet like her ex, and like me and him are like tight, like within hours. We're like homies. He's like, yeah, you should. I think he told you should marry him, and he's like, there's this real romantic area. You guys need to go out. So one of the days we were there, we go out to this place and we're like, it's like stars in the sky. We're on the beach. We're just
in Hawaii.
In Hawaii. It's just super romantic. And we're like, and we were laying down. We started like kind of getting a little bit closer.
There's no line at this
And
point.
dude, it's like, bro, it's going to go to 6th gear quick.
Yep.
And so right when we're probably about to just fumble the biscuit, the sprinklers start going off. No lie. I mean,
on a beach.
We're on the beach.
Or are they sprinkling? I don't know.
And I wish I could like, I always wanted like a video camera of my life so I could go back to that day and be like, how the heck was there sprinklers?
Where was this sprinkler coming from?
What was that? Yeah.
It's almost like manna.
But it was like God's like,
God's cooling us off.
it was like God going, hey man, hey, cool off.
Yeah.
Like,
You made a commitment. You can't keep it, but I'm going to help you.
I'm going to help you. And that's been God's grace time and time again for us.
Yeah.
Even when we fumble the rock, he's quick to forgive, help us get back on track. And that's been the process for us.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then you guys make the decision to get married.
Yep. That was there in Hawaii.
So you were engaged at this point?
No.
Actually,
Oh, no. You
when was
proposed
that? It was
then.
No,
right.
that was like when we got close enough to realize, okay, we're doing this.
Yeah, and then we
right
went on
after
a
that.
mission trip to
later.
Honduras. Yeah, it was like a week or two later, and I proposed to her in Honduras. And yeah, so then we got married a couple months later, and
We got married 2.5 months after we got
in Fort
engaged.
Lauderdale. Yeah.
Cool. But at the church where you were at? Mm-hmm. Very cool. So what did that look like then after you get married? Because there's a point where you start to go try to play football again, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, so we get married May 2000. I re-signed with the Dolphins, and we're going to training camp, and I bet would have been August of whatever that year, the year we got married. And our head coach, Jimmy Johnson, he moved on. This other guy came in, and right before training camp started, he called me in. He's like, "Hey Todd, we're gonna go ahead and let you go." And I'm married for 3 months, and I'm like, "What?" And so I had to go home with my tail between the legs and be like, look to Denise and be like, "Hey babe, like I don't have a job. I've been married for 3 months," and that was honestly super devastating. This is my dream. I'm living it, and then all of a sudden it was like taken away. So it was good growth opportunity. And I mean, credit to D Money. She's like, "Hey, like I got a full-time job. We're good. We're gonna do this."
Yep.
And she was super supportive at that point, which I think, that's a lesson in of itself.
Sure.
Some of the young wives out there, they're listening. It's like, what are you doing to support your husband? If you think about the Bible, really basic, even if you don't believe in Jesus, even if you don't, just take this. The Bible just says, love your wife like Christ loved the church, gave himself for her. Just absolutely love her unconditionally. And then it says, wives, respect your husbands as in the Lord. Why is that? Because I'm created to be respected.
Yep.
She's created to be loved. So if she's having her love tank filled, she's going to probably, if she's a goodwill woman, she's going to respect me.
Yep.
So that
I like
push,
the
that
probably.
piece of respect was huge. It wasn't like, idiot, are you kidding me?
What'd
3
you
months
do?
in, what'd you do? Like,
Yeah.
come on, man. She's like, no, we got this. And she's been like that from the entire time of our marriage.
Yep.
And I've done some wild stuff, like taking shots downfield, but she's always, man, like when we first started the real estate investment company, I looked to her, I was like, "Hey, I know you love your truck, but we need a down payment on our first rental property. What do you think?" And she's like, "I trust you." So I literally liquidated that unit to have the cash to put down on our first rental property. Yep. If she doesn't say that, we don't start our real estate investment journey. How many properties in? You wouldn't have started because she would have been like, she's never been like that.
I want to ask something real quick though.
Yeah.
So how did you learn that? Because you
That
had
same
done,
stinking class.
but that was how many years before?
Wow,
A
the
couple years
peanuts lady.
before? But even if you hear that, it's still like, no, that's for
Yeah.
people. It's not for me. So how did you learn that? Because that was how many years before? A couple years before?
Yeah, probably
maybe?
3 or 4. Mm-hmm.
And then now you have, because it's sometimes when you hear biblical teachings, it's like, okay, yeah, that's for me. I'm going to listen to that. But then when you have to apply it, it's completely different.
Yeah.
And there's a challenge. So
or it doesn't apply now. So you want me to save that for when? What? How do I pull that out? Yeah. To be honest, I had a rhythm. We had been challenged early on in our marriage to get in the Word daily. And so what happened with that was, this guy, he would tell us all the time, get in the Word, get in the Word, get in the Word. But then,
for those who don't know, the Word is the
Bible. Yeah.
Like the Word of God.
Yeah. And so what I learned by going through the Word is just God's way, like how to do life, and so how to do marriage, what it looks like to be a woman. If you go check out, if you are unfamiliar with Proverbs 31, going through Proverbs 31, reading it, doing a class on Titus 2, those things. And then we started teaching premarital classes, and that's convicting. You're telling other people what to do, what you're not doing. Like, oh my
Wow.
goodness.
100%.
Yeah.
But so it was just layer after layer of digging into God's Word one way or another, whether it be a class or just getting in the Word daily. And then I would have journaling times with him. And then he would bring conviction. And then I had these things called prayer portions. And I would literally pray every day over my husband. And God would just impress on my heart what to pray for or what to do, what not to do. So I think the practice on that journey, just helped empower. And then obviously the people around me, getting to watch people model it.
Yes.
I was blessed with a lot of women who are doing life God's way, which in every season, and we'll get to that when we get to parenting too, but in every season, I feel like God's always ahead of us, and he always puts somebody in front of us that's further ahead or along than we are, so that we get to see what it looks like, and he's so faithful to do that if we're willing to open our eyes, and so he did that for me as well.
Really
So it was
good.
super sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Super sweet. Thank you for asking.
Okay. So you've gotten to this spot now where job's gone. Denise is the one that's providing.
Yeah.
Ton of humility in that season for you. Now what?
Yeah.
So what'd you guys do from there?
Man, we almost bought a gym. The
my
day
goodness.
we went
Thank
to
the
sign the papers, she didn't have a piece about it, so we backed out of that deal. We waited. I ended up getting a call from one of my coaches who wanted me to play in the XFL when it first started, that crazy league out in LA. So we went out there, got hurt in the XFL. Ended up playing 5 years in the Arena Football League, went to Bible college through that process, had our twin boys during that time, and retired from football. It was a 7-8 year pro career, and we had a great time, man. But during that time, we would come back to Omaha in our off season, and we'd have like a home Bible study. So literally, we just invite whoever, and we'd go through one book of the Bible, and we just discuss it, and super fun, old school. And all these people started showing up, and then when I retired, it was cool because we'd have a Bible study for 6 months, and they'll be like, "All right, see you guys. We're going to play a season." When I retired, I took a job with Fellowship of Christian Athletes here. Well, now that kept on, like, you go 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Now all of a sudden, the basement, like, there's not enough room.
It's just getting big.
And so we saw, like, God's turning this into a church. I don't know how to do church. What the heck? So long story short, I called my pastor in Fort Lauderdale. I'm like, I don't know what to do. This is turning into a church. He's like, why don't you just come down here, dude, on the job training. We'll teach you, you'll just send it. We'll just throw you in the game, throw you in the deep end of the pool. So that's what we did. We packed up, sold everything, and just went down to Fort Lauderdale and had basically a 2-year fire hose, like on the job training on how to lead a church.
Denise, how did you show support to Todd during this season of him pursuing a career that, for all intents and purposes up to this point, didn't have a lot of stability?
Yeah.
All over the place, chasing a dream essentially. And there's so many of us out there that are chasing a dream and a spouse is coming alongside us. Like, when do we stop chasing this and we get some stability in our life? How did you practically love him, support him, and walk with him during that time? And then the follow-up to that for either one of you would be, when you guys made the decision to go back to Florida and start this church, maybe walk through how you guys were having that conversation. Say, man, ministry, like NFL ministry, pro career, corporate America ministry.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think is super cool is God put the seed in both of our hearts early on when we first got saved to be in ministry.
Okay.
Like, that seed was already there. We didn't know what it looked like. We didn't know if it was just holding Bible studies. We didn't know if it was marriage ministry, what it was. But we knew we both had that seed planted way long time ago. So it was just being birthed. So keep that in mind while we're going here. Now, when he's a dreamer, but I'm just as much of a dreamer. So for me, it's not hard to see. Now, I might be a little bit more like, okay, give me a bullet point of how that's going to work. Like, give me some logistics here. But like, okay.
That's your job. I don't know. Help me out here, all right?
But
help me.
I think I've heard so many different teaching, especially if I know this is there's an author, I'm not going to even mention who because it's so controversial, but there's an author that we've studied in the past where it talks about how some men are visionaries. Some men are like, we call them command men. They're running, and some men are visionaries, and then some men are like, it's prophet, priest, and king, basically. And so they're wired differently. And so you have to learn how to complement each one so differently. So he's part king and visionary. And so what that means, like, I'm a driver, I'm going to get up, we're going to do this thing. It's very consistent. We're doing this, but then also a dreamer, you know? And so then on the flip side of that, it's like, okay, how can we have a little bit of an anchor? And so honestly, for me, it's consistency in the word daily and consistency in the little things, you know?
For
so,
you.
For me.
Yeah.
So like getting up, getting to the gym, making sure that I'm in prayer, because if he's going to say something wild, my mouth needs to be ready to speak what God wants me to speak instead of what I'm thinking in my mind. Because if I just say what I'm thinking in my mind, it might not be filtered enough for his ears yet, you know?
Yes.
And
So
so if
good,
I
man.
take it to the Lord first, you always go to the Father first because the Father filters what you're going to say to make it digestible for whoever your spouse is. So if you go to the Father first, then it's like, okay, here's what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. Help me say it in a way that brings like light of where I'm at, but also doesn't like damage the dream, you know, if that makes sense.
Wow.
And so that's not always easy when you have like all these thoughts and ideas and questions. And so it's like, reel it in, ask the Lord, and he'll show you the next thing to think or say. Like just yesterday, he said something to me, and I was like, I'm not quite seeing that. Can we sit down and talk about it? Or can you write it out so I can understand like what you mean by that, you know? And he's dreaming and he's figuring out a way, and that's awesome. Praise the Lord. Thank God we have someone doing that. But show me more, like help me understand so I can be on the same page and cheer with you. There was one time the house sale, I won't even talk about it, but just times where it's just like, it's almost like I must need, because you're never in anything you don't need, ever. So I must need all the time to be tested so that like my pride would be checked, you know?
Yeah.
And so all the time I'm being tested in ways like, you didn't think that was going to happen. Okay, so now how do I handle it? You know, so I just feel like it's a really good way for me to learn how to return to the Lord so that my words, my mouth, my thoughts, they're his, not mine. That makes sense. So.
Just total self-control.
I was just
trying.
gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, to the best of your ability with what you have at that.
I would
at any
add
time.
to that is at the end of my, because the original question is, how does she not be like, dude, you're chasing a dream, bro.
Yeah.
This dream has died. Let's bury it, move on. I think I could celebrate her patience because she probably would say you went maybe two seasons too long. And she's probably right, if we're really honest. There was a time, here's what happened. In 2004, we landed in Carolina in the Arena League. And for whatever reason, it was my best season for the first 10 weeks. So there's an NFL franchise there as well. So the scouts are there watching our games. So if I finish that season healthy and still making plays, one of the top receivers in the league, I'm getting invited to camp. That's 04. So I'm right there, back to get into the NFL. And in week 10, our coach got fired. Our defensive coordinator took over. The first thing he did was bench myself and Matt Nagy, who was my quarterback, who's now the offensive coordinator at the Chiefs. The first thing he does, he brings Matt and I in. He's like, hey, guys, we're making some changes. And Nagy and I are looking at each other like, what?
They have the highest record
Yeah, we're
of
like
connection.
top 3 in the whole league, top 2 in the, Matt's slanging it, dude, making me look like Jerry Rice out there.
Defense wins championships, bro.
I know, right? He's like, you guys are done or whatever.
That didn't happen.
And it's crazy. And then God uses it all.
Yeah.
Because he's testing my heart.
That's
Are
right.
you a team player? Are you yes,
Sure.
coach? Whatever you say. So I'm like, I go from like the main receiver to I'm holding field goals. That's all I do. Till the end, the very last game of the season, the guy that took my job was out doing some stuff he shouldn't have done the night before. So the first series of the game, the quarterback benches him. It's 3rd down. He's like, get out of my huddle. Kicks him out. I like jump over, have a good game, and then they sign me for another year, the franchise we were playing. So I say all that to say, it's like she was super patient. I probably, but I'm like, in my mind, all of us are visionary dreamers. We're like, if you give me a little taste, I'm stubborn, dude.
Yep.
Like I'll find a way to figure it out. And that's part of what God does to grow us, to try to grow us in humility and understanding when is the right time to push through.
Yeah.
When is the right time to go, all right, the season has shifted. We say all the time, sense the season.
Yep.
what is the Spirit of God saying when it comes to the season?
Amen.
But she was super gracious, and I commend her for that for sure.
Well, one thing I always laugh about is like he's a risk taker, I'm a risk mitigator. So
Yep.
it's like what's great about that is that I will take risks that I maybe never would have because I'm married to him. And then what's great about that for him is like he'll be restricted on some things that maybe he never would have, and he's
Yep.
saving
Yeah.
himself a little bit.
Saving us. Yeah, you saved
So
our bacon. Yeah,
but then
for
there's
sure.
times where we both fail. So there's all
Well,
of the
sure,
above.
but it's such a growing process. But even so, I'm just going back because Todd, you touched on the fact that you had gotten told at an early age you aren't big enough for basketball.
Boom.
You aren't this, you weren't that. And so having almost like you had the self-control, and that's such a great quality. But even having patience, it's like, okay, I've had patience. Like I can just think of wives saying, okay, I've had patience for this long, now it's my turn, or now it's my decision. And so for you, had you not been in the Word, had you given in to your flesh to say, probably done, that would have potentially taken you down, really, taken down your character, your identity, even like, okay, here I am again. So how old were you then? In 2004?
26, 28.
So here you are again. And like those things that people say to you when you're young come back up sometimes through your
Right,
spouse.
for
Absolutely.
sure.
We don't even know that we're touching on that. But
Yeah.
Well, I think honestly, you're onto something, Bree, because in my opinion, KB and I just talked about this recently. My personal opinion, a lot of great marriages can get completely disheveled by something so small. What happens is now bitterness, a root of bitterness starts getting in, or resentment. And all you have that little thing combined with a past you've never dealt with, that explodes and it blows up marriages because you don't deal with that. If you come humbly and go, that really hurt me, and let's pray about this, let's get this out so we don't have that resentment. Because if, rejection, bitterness, all that, if I hold on to that, that's going to start creating a huge divide. And before you know it, you're like, who are you and why are we here?
And if we're super honest, that's the difference between our faith and any other. And we're not here to like talk religion or whatever. But the reality is when you need something that in the Bible tells us how many different names and characteristics and traits God has. So like, let's just say one of them being patience, one of them being redemption. Like if I need patience, all I have to do is go to the cross. The cross says anything that I need, he is, which is wild for us to think the gospel applied to marriage, right? Like if I need something, a characteristic or trait that I am not, I can go to the one who is and ask him for it, and he empowers me to do that, which is really hard for anyone who doesn't know the Lord. It's really hard for them to say, what are you talking? It's hard for them to like look on and think, like, what do you mean you did the exchange? Like I exchanged my frustration, my anger, my impatience for God. Just confess it to him, and then he gave me his measure of patience for that moment, which is wild for people to hear. But the reality is so many more marriages would fail if there's so many people I know that have to press into the Lord and they're able to get through whatever that circumstance is, and they're willing. You guys are a testament to that. But the reality is so many people don't know that that's how they're doing it, and so to not testify that today would be really just slapping Jesus in the face. So needed to do that.
Yeah, it's great, man.
And it's free.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. We spend all of this money and resources and counseling and all of that to go get help. And there's a time and a place for those things, 100%.
Yeah.
No shade on what those people do.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if we just can submit to Jesus, he will fill every void that we've ever had in our life, and then provide so much more after the fact.
Right.
And we see that in every aspect of our life. Like when we get this right, everything else just gets easier around us because we've got this safe place and safe space of marriage. And I love it. You guys start doing ministry then in Florida. You're all in ministry, not just Bible studies, but hey, we're going to go down and we're going to teach, learn to teach.
Yeah.
Walk us through that.
Well, like I said, it was fire hose ministry, man. I mean, because we walk into a church of 15,000, 20,000 people. I don't know. It was crazy. So the amount of just sheer opportunity to serve and to counsel and to teach and to do weddings and funerals. And I'll never forget my first funeral. The funeral director came to me and she's like, hey, all right, Todd, you're up. I know you're a rookie, but you got your choice. I'm going to give you two choices. There's a five-day-old baby that died and a 50-year-old alcoholic that died. Take your pick. And I'm like, huh?
C,
and I go
option
to
C, please.
Is there tap out and run back to Omaha right now? Like, is there any of that? So by God's grace, there was a dude, Dallas, one of the pastors. He's like, come on, bro. Like he brought me into his little office, counseled me, gave me like a little template. Dude, I'll never forget.
A mentor.
Mentor.
Some dude that taught you.
Yeah.
And I picked the 50-year-old dude. It was so tragic, man. You know, here's an alcoholic. I think there was 3 people that showed up to his funeral from his workplace. No family. And it just breaks your heart. And you're like, dude. And it was like this moment that I was like, holy smokes, dude. Like God is real. His word works. And man, I want to help as many people as we can. Like this dude, I'm sure was a good enough guy, probably something from his past, got addicted to alcohol. And next thing you know, ruins all these relationships. It breaks your heart.
Yeah.
So you go, man, why are we in ministry? We want people to experience God's best. Denise and I, so gracious to us to forgive us and set us on a whole new trajectory. So we're like, dude, we're doing this. And so it just was beautiful, man. The opportunities we had right and left. I mean, you know, I remember they would give us this, we had this class on Thursday nights. So it was called Deep Faith. And there was it was like 8 classes or something like that. And they give you like an outline, but they're like, it's the outline, but you go teach it. I was like, what? All right. And I mean, I cut my teeth on 20 people, 20 gracious people, 25 people in a classroom looking at me like I'm the pastor. And I'm like, okay. Like, and I'm learning, like watching my pastor, how he opens with a story or, you know, it's some type of enrolling question or something to get people in. So I'm just whipping up some of these to enter into the class and learning on the fly, man.
Just replication, watching what they do and seeing how it sticks, and whatever's sticky, give it a shot.
And then trying to find my own voice too. Like trying to be who am I really?
Yeah.
I want to walk with who God made me to be.
Yep.
And maximize that while taking in a lot of this information. And we stand on the shoulders of so many in Fort Lauderdale and what they gave away to us. And we wouldn't be where we're at without their support for sure.
And you've got the boys at this time, right? Boys are back there. How old were they?
When we were there, probably they were 3, 4, and 5, right? And then we moved back here when they were turning 6. Yeah.
Okay. So what was your role during this season while he's doing this? What were you doing?
So it's great. When we first got there, it was interesting too, because this is the height of the market, like the housing market, the crash in 2008. Sure. Remember, like all that stuff. So that's all going on, and God's supernatural protection. We tried to purchase 3 houses. Our goal was to be there for 5 years and really just take it all in and learn as much as we can. They allowed us to launch the first satellite campus from the main hub down there. And so we were learning, like being the campus pastors, but being just so close that we would have every resource we could ever possibly need. But when this was going on, we were trying to purchase a home. God's protective power. Oh my goodness. We put a down payment on a house. Something would happen and go wrong. It was wild how many times God's hand of protection. We would have been stuck in a house, not being able to pay the mortgage in the house. It dropped $200,000 in like a year and a half, 2 years. So we would never have been able to get out of it as young, newly married.
Talk about buy high, sell low.
Right.
You guys were there.
Right. And so then we ended up renting a townhouse right next door to the church. And it was wild how God provided protection in those weird ways. All through our marriage, there's a million different things I could tell you about how he protected us throughout and directed us throughout. So it'd be like, you're going to move here. No, you're not. Just kidding. This is going to happen. Or you think you're going to be in California. Okay, no, you're not going to have enough money to provide for yourself. So we're going to allow your furniture to crash so that you can claim the insurance, so that you have enough money to move back when your kids need to be born. Like there were just these little moments of our life where God's provision was astounding. We failed to give our HR people the total amount that we needed, because like, how much do you need to make in order to survive when you're working here in Fort Lauderdale at this church? We're like, oh, this much. Well, we gave them the amount without our current rent or mortgage because we're living with my mom. Guess what? We were upside down $2,000 a month.
$1,700 every month we were upside down.
Because we just we failed to realize, oh my goodness, we forgot. We don't pay for anything right now.
Yeah. But
God miraculously showed up in crazy ways. It was like the season of us knowing our God is faithful. Although you don't have what you need, he's going to provide. Every month, there was not one time we failed to have the finances we need to do anything. So whether it was pay for the mortgage or take the kids to the doctor, it didn't matter. He showed up in every way. And it was such a learning experience for us to depend on him. And so here, this is going on. We're training in church how to be a pastor, like in a classroom / pulpit setting. But over here at home, what it really takes to have the faith to step out and plant a church is faith. Like, let's watch God show up in this way. So we're being tested in all these different crazy ways. And so whether it was home with finances and God providing in that crazy way, or him teaching us how to open a Bible and share a word, it was just kind of wild how he would sprinkle it around.
It was cool. 2 things. so one time I'll never forget, there was an envelope on our front
Yes.
door with my name spelled wrong with like $1,700 of cash in it. Like verbatim, like exactly what we needed. And then a guy at the church was starting a business for like dressers. So he's like, I need some work. I'm like, all right, dude, I'll work for you. So like on extra days, I would
Such
go.
an amazing carpenter.
Dude, zero game at, and you guys know how uncrafty I am. I'm like, all right, this gracious guy, Chris,
He's making dressers.
he's making
Yes,
like
putting them together.
We'd take the wood and we'd plane the wood, and then like it was like
Tooth
the
and
little
whatever,
what do you
you
call it?
know.
I don't know what
tongue
you
and
call
groove
that.
or something.
Yeah, like I'm learning all this stuff, and he like I still have all 10 fingers, and I have
doing
no
demo
idea,
on
but
another
God was
day.
providing miraculously, but then he was also providing like, all right, dude, like you're in a season where you got to pony up, bro.
You had to take
need
initiative,
2, 3, 4
man.
jobs. What do you
Yeah.
need?
Yeah.
So that was
Little did
also
we know.
something that was helping us set up for when we came back. When I got 3 jobs, she's got
Between
a
us,
ton
we
of
had
jobs.
7 jobs
Yeah,
when we first
to
planted
start the church. It's like, all right, let's go.
I
And
love that. I love that. Just for a second, let me stop because there's so many people where they don't make enough money. We hear all the time, finances.
Yeah,
We're so short on finances, and then they sit there and play video games, or they find all of these other vices out there to fill their time. And here you are in this season of, man, we need to survive.
Just go.
But my work ethic, and I'm going to go out and continue to try to provide for a family
Right.
because we don't want to be here forever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily about the money. It's just like, maybe it was like, hey, we've got to get to this. We've got to get to
We need
a
to
certain.
eat.
We've got to eat.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, we don't
but you
lack
took
we don't-
initiative.
I think here's the thing. When you have twin boys that are hungry at home,
Yeah.
and you have a wife that you're providing for, I think your incentive, we don't lack ability. That's how we say it. We lack incentive at times. My incentive was right there. And I do want to say, while we were in Fort Lauderdale, she actually had phenomenal practical hands-on church experience with volunteer. Like she oversaw all of our volunteers at the Boca Raton campus. She did counseling.
Which was
there was all
different.
kinds of ministry opportunities that she jumped into while still making sure she's raising the kids and had plenty of time with the kids. I don't know how she did it.
And being a wife.
Well,
Oh,
we
golly.
had 4,600 volunteers, and it was wild to think like some churches don't even have that many people in their church. So that was just a crazy fun season. But yeah, so
A lot of preparation.
a lot
for
of
sure.
preparation in every kind of way at home with the kiddos, and then with the different roles that they had us play at church.
That's awesome. And then you make the decision to start your own church.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you
Yeah,
guys?
It was again,
This is a wild
and
story.
she mentioned it. I mean, she said, we're thinking 5-7 years down in Fort
Yep.
Lauderdale training. And it was weird because, we're a year and a half in, we're up in the mountains. Some of our great friends down there had a mountain home, and they saw how busy we were in ministry. They gave us the keys to their house. They're like, get out of here. And so we were so blessed. We go up in the mountains, and we're hanging out as a family, getting some downtime, praying. And the Lord just starts impressing on our heart, like, man, it's time to go back and start the church. And we're like looking at each other like, dude, it's
We
been a
just
year and a
got
half.
here.
Like, what? No way.
Look, can I ask this really fast? Did you know that you wanted to come back to Omaha?
Yes, we
Yeah.
did.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you guys knew, both of you had made that decision already
Yeah.
collectively.
Yeah.
Said
Yeah.
at some point we're going to go back to Omaha, thinking it's 5 to 7 years.
Right, because remember that Bible study kept growing, and we
Yep.
asked the pastor, "What do we do?" He's like, "Come here, train, and then
Yep.
we'll send you back."
So
Yeah.
you're thinking
Yeah.
5 to 7.
Super
but here we are.
indebted to that pastor and the entire team to give us the opportunity. Who does that?
Yeah.
Brings them on the team. We continue to invest. And then, oh, by the way, we're sending them to the Midwest.
Right.
Like, who does that?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That's kingdom mindset.
Yeah.
For sure.
Big time kingdom mindset.
So you're in the mountains.
So we're in the mountains, and we just really sense it's time. So we came back, and we told our pastor, we're like, man, I know this is early, but we really sense that we're supposed to go back. He's like, hey, tell you what, let's take a week, and all of us will pray, and call me next week, and we'll go through kind of what we're feeling.
Great leaders.
So
Right.
such a pro tip for leadership. So during that week, out of all places in America, who makes national headlines? Omaha, Nebraska does, because there was a 19-year-old, unfortunately, kid that was struggling, probably with insecurity, probably with pain. And out of his mind, some demonic stuff comes and starts shooting up at this mall in Omaha, a bunch of people, and it makes national news.
Yeah, December 7th or
I
something.
mean, it's
like
like, this is insane. So from that, I call my pastor like a week to the day. So he told me to do. He answers the phone. He's like, "Hey Todd, I don't need any more confirmation." He's like, "That man." That 19-year-old represents a whole culture that God's asking you to go back to Omaha and to help out. They need help, man. And sorry, I don't know why
good.
I get choked up about this.
Dude, it's this powerful moment.
So it was confirmation. It was like, all right, dude, you're going. And we're looking at each other like, now what? What do we do now? You know? Yeah. And so he was so cool. They prayed for us on a Wednesday. The way that the Calvary Chapel movement does it, they're like, all right, go get some jobs, start teaching the Bible and see what happens. So we literally moved here. We rented out a little middle school. We just started teaching the Bible. And I went to this middle school. So imagine, a snot-nosed 8th grader eating tater tots and like vanilla malts, in this room. Yeah. And now fast forward years later, you're delivering the food of the Word of God in the same cafeteria that you grew up in. It was so weird.
The same place where it all started.
Same place,
Insecurity.
Insecurity, all that kind of stuff, yeah. And then we graduated to the high school. We were in the high school for, golly, about a decade plus in the auditorium. They were super gracious to us and had a great environment to build a church. And then, it's been how long now? 3 years or so that we've had
4 in December.
Permanent location. And then again, we're starting our next location not this Sunday, the following Sunday in the north part of Omaha. And then our online church, we have a phenomenally gifted online pastor. His influence has grown. Yep. So it's just what's happened is insane from that one point, man, when we were sitting there. It's like, and there's no credit that Denise and I take. We just thank God that he sovereignly chose us to play a small part in helping as many people as we can. Yeah. And we're just trying to say yes every day. That's really it. Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah. Long story there. Thank you for sharing all of that. Now let's talk a little bit about what parenting looked like through that season, because there's 2 boys in here that have made a little bit of the story. Yeah. But being a wife is one thing. Being parents is an entirely another level of that and complexity to what it looks like to have a great marriage. You've got 2 of them, same age, 2 boys, who are amazing, by the way. But what did it look like raising them through all of this, right? Like first of all, pastor kids, everybody knows what it means to be a PK. You're like, oh my gosh, what's that kid going to turn out to be like? And you guys have 2 amazing boys. Yeah. So you've done something right. And I know you're going to give God all of the glory, but practically, what does that look like for you guys? And the different seasons that you've had to go through now that they're in their early 20s and building their own lives and creating their own legacies.
I'll just say 2 quick things to come to mind, then I'll make sure D-Money has some opportunity. Again, our pastor in Fort Lauderdale, he said, I'm trying to make it simple, parenting. He said, tons of love, tons of discipline, consistency throughout. And that was a phrase that stuck with us for many, many years. I think the other thing was we learned from them to protect your family time and don't let ministry become your mistress and don't let your ministry become your God. Make sure that you have your family time. Wow. So we protected our family by God's grace, had very clear rhythms where we didn't take a lot of meetings in the evenings, and the church didn't grow as quickly as it probably could have, but we just said no to a lot of stuff. Yeah. And my goal was I want to have a solid marriage, and I want our kids, when they leave, I want them to want to come back. I want to be good friends with them. And that was a major goal that we learned from our pastor in Fort Lauderdale and then Andy Stanley. So we're standing on his shoulders. And so I think that's big. And then the last thing I would say is, and I'm working on this concept of polite parenting, giving clear direction, not raising your voice, please and thank you. And I don't know, there was something about that early on that we learned again from one of my teammates actually in New York modeled it. And he used this rod of discipline. He's like, okay, sweetheart, this is what I want you to do. Yeah. This is honoring to God and to us. If you choose not to obey, you're choosing this instrument of pain. Please don't do that. That's not what I want you to do. Yep. And he would explain that. He wasn't yelling at her.
Yeah,
I was like,
she was like 2 or 3.
I was like, what are you?
A 20-year-old.
That's never going to work. And sure enough, it did, And
we were like laughing at him at first.
Yeah, we were kind of like,
we were like, what's that going to do?
Good luck.
And sure enough, and so we instituted the rod of discipline. We it's just biblical. It's just Bible.
That shifts through age, right? The rod itself shifts. It's just the practical application of what it is based on how well they can learn and how well they can understand what's going on in that season. For us right now, it's cell phones and cars.
Yeah,
Right.
it's true, and it really is.
It's a choice.
You're showing honor to the kids by giving them choice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the Bible's very clear about that. Like
Yeah.
you're neglecting love in those moments if you choose not to discipline.
And we had over 30 kids live with us that were older, like 15 to
Yeah, that was
20,
helpful,
25 years old. And their discipline was extremely different
Sure.
than when the boys were 3 or 5 or whatever. Like we would take their clothes.
One time we had this girl from Florida live with us. I got home and we're big on making beds. The first thing when you wake up, make your bed, make it look good, keep your room tidy. And she was really good. But then for whatever reason, she was like late getting up or something. And it just so happened I went down in the basement and I never really checked her room, opened her door, and it was disheveled. Yeah, I just trust her. And I took a video and I'm like, and I won't say her name, but I was like, sweetheart, I'll just see sweetheart. You know, again, and this is we're trying to help you understand little disciplines in life.
Not yelling.
Not yelling,
raising your
zero.
voice, kind and clear.
And you know the understanding, you chose discipline. So when you get home from school, we're going to run some gassers. So she literally got home. We had a football field across from the house that we raised the kids in. And her and I just ran gassers, dude, till she puked. Yeah.
You ran them with her?
Oh yeah.
See?
I ran them with her. And we just went after it. And so, it takes different forms, but and it's not to be mean or arrogant or, I'm some,
to drive fear or anything like that.
No, it was
It's
nothing
pure
like that.
love.
It was like, dude, I'm trying to help you understand life.
Yeah.
The choices we make, there's going to be consequences. Do you want God's best, or do you want to do your own way and feel the consequences? We're trying to help you. And so we actually asked the kids, do you ever remember Dad yelling at you? And I think Blaze was the only one. He said, one time. And I do remember that in high school. Like I lost my Jenkins, dude, and I had to apologize.
I think it was they saw you mad. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
They were like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
Like,
But it's
I think that we don't realize how much our tone and like the. I just watched this happen this week where parents, they're almost on edge is the word I want to use. It's like on edge. And your kids pick up on that, and it's easy to pretend like that doesn't matter, but it does. And there's only one place where you find peace, and until you're willing to just realize, okay, hang on, I need a minute because I'm totally misrepresenting who God is here in our family. And if I don't step away and get with him, I'm going to continue to look this way to them, and it's just going to continue to influence them. And you have to just be mindful enough and willing to just know when you're wrong. Just know when you're wrong and own it, and that was one thing that we tried practicing too, is when we were wrong or in front of our kids, or this is something that I think is so big. We learned as the kids got older, we did not have the same parenting style. Up until they were in their teens, we had the exact same parenting style.
Okay, so when they hit their teens, that shifted?
Probably around 15.
And 2 boys.
Yes,
So
So I won't let you guess who was a little bit more crazy. But the idea of, okay, this is totally different. We are always on the exact same page, and all of a sudden, and then we're having like a disagreement in our hearts about what they shouldn't be doing in front of them now. Like, wait a minute, that's not what we're called to. So the reality is then they pick up on something Dad says and own it. Oh, Dad said, So then having that idea, just knowing in your heart, okay, let's be together on this, like-minded. If we're going to, be challenged in the way that we want to parent differently, let's pray about it, get outside, in our bedroom when they're not around and like chat through it, and then make sure that when we're disagreeing, it's not in front of them to give them ammo to like take a side or be whatever. But it was really funny, like learning and growing through that, because that's not easy when you want to do something different than your spouse when it comes to training up your kids. It's hard.
Really hard. And you guys just make a great point of taking that in behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Talking about it with one another. What's it look like then when you come back out and you have to explain to them, hey, mom and dad are on the same page?
Well, let me go back for a second, because there were times, and I would say I'd be the biggest culprit. Tragically, it's one of my regrets on parenting, dishonoring my wife before the kids. So we made a commitment. It's like, man, I need to apologize in front of my children for my misrepresentation of God in my tone or demeaning her or disrespectful. And I think that's probably my number one regret parenting is I was disrespectful to her in front of the kids more than I'd want to know, more than I'd like to say. But I will say that was something we committed to, is apologizing in front of them, and I think that...
And to them.
To them.
Yep.
Yeah, like saying, sorry, will you guys forgive me? That's not honoring to God, that, and it's definitely not honoring to your mom. And so I don't know. I think that's a big thing to understand.
It's hard when you're a prideful parent to like want to own that in front of your kids, right? But really think about it. Really, all you're doing is training them how to walk with their friends and, family, and eventually their spouse.
Yeah.
But I would say, I mean, that's a big part of our story. Is for whatever reason, God's grace. The first 15 years of marriage, we talk about this. Like, it's just like it worked so good. Like, I mean, I don't know. I could probably count on my hand how many fights we had in the first 15 years of marriage. But then when the kids got into that ninth grade, through high school, we just had a total disagreement on how we would do parenting. And that caused some bitterness and some resentment, some friction in our marriage. And you know what? That's what I was just talking about. All of a sudden you have like a little wedge in there. And so our rhythm, we were off.
Yep.
And it wasn't the whole time. But I would say that was a big deal. And then when we became empty nesters, then it's almost like we had a honeymoon again, and then we went through a mourning season. We're like, oh no, they're gone. They're not gonna be little kids anymore. And then, this part of our life, I feel like we're hitting a really good stride again. But there was probably a 4-year period it was a struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you see it right now, I guess, in culture. There's baby boomers are the ones that are divorcing at the fastest rate right now. Kids are out of the house. They've got 2 homes. They've got good income. They haven't really been connected for the last 20, 25, 30 years. So it's like, this is just easy. We haven't even really slept in the same bed. Yep. So to have this foundation laid all the way through for when we get to this spot of being empty nesters of like, okay, we get to thrive now. Yeah. But then we go through these different seasons. You talk about seasons and rhythms a lot.
Big time.
What are some of the ways that you guys have implemented those? Like the practicality of what's your season schedule look like? Yeah. And how has that shifted over time? And then what are some of the practical rhythms that you've put into place that people could look at and say, man, I need that?
I could go on for an hour on this. So I'm trying in my mind, maybe Mama, you can help me. Let me just give you let's stay on the parenting and the family thing. Okay. Because I'm so passionate about families staying healthy. Do you want to give that illustration?
Well, just like when early on, you guys have probably seen that illustration of putting like rocks in a jar.
Yeah, right? the big rock, the next size down.
Yeah, like making sure your big rocks are the most important things in your season are in first, and you're taking care of those things first. So obviously, first and foremost, if you have a relationship with the Lord, then that goes first, and then with your spouse, and then with your kids, and then anything else that you can add, still leaving margin, and still leaving room. And so I feel like you kind of have to sit down seasonally, and we have like a business meeting time and then a family meeting time. And as we sit down and look at like, we did not do well on margin these last whatever many months, and then going in and being willing to look at that for future and then making a new plan and going like, okay, this is going to work a little bit better. So we learned early on with the whole rocks thing, and then we encouraged our staff to do that as well. And we've been really blessed, so blessed. And early on, people challenged us when we weren't taking vacations.
Yeah. What are some of the big rocks for you guys? If you're willing to share those.
Yeah.
Let me just give you some basics. Again, going back to the family, we decided, let's just start in season 1, which would be January, February, March, April. We just decided that every March, when the kids were young, we celebrate. All of our birthdays are in March. Okay. So we go for 5 days. It's family. And we went skiing. Most of the time we would just drive to Colorado. We'd go skiing. And it was a 4-person lift. We'd go up. We'd just we'd have no phone, no email, no nothing. It's just every March. That's what we did. And then every May, which is our anniversary, we had 4 days gone. And we dropped the kids off. Like with the grandparents, we're gone.
So trip with kids. A few months later, trip with just you two.
Just us. Okay. Just us. That was every single anniversary. And then in July we had our family vacation, and we do like a little sabbatical in July. And those were like some boulders from the family schedule. Okay.
Early
and then
that was really small. July was really small. It was more.
So then the daily rhythms were. We had a date every Tuesday. So Tuesday was our day. Monday night, we'd turn our phones off. Wednesday morning, we turn it back on.
You just freaked out every listening right now. They all were like, I'm done, tuning out, phones off.
So Tuesday was like completely disconnected, where we dropped the kids off. They had a little Christian school. We'd do a little date at this Thai place. Every Tuesday, we'd go over our schedule. It was a non-negotiable. And then we'd turn on the phone on Wednesday and crank it back up. And so it's date lunch for many years it was for us.
And you've done this for years.
And this was a non-negotiable. And again, it's like you look at your goals. What's our goal? My number one goal is I want to honor the Lord and finish strong.
Yep.
My number two is I want to make sure my wife feels loved and we have a great relationship. And I want our children to see that, and I want them to thrive and to experience God's best. So, there's so much vying for our attention, but you have to go back to, what do you really want?
Yep.
When Mike's been saying this a lot. When he's on his deathbed, he wants the people that are closest to him to respect him the most.
Yep.
So how are you going to do that?
Yep.
You got to say no to some stuff. And so, that's just a basic example. I mean, I could go into a ton of different details, but I would suggest, a non-negotiable day that you shut completely off and somehow have some type of rhythm where you're meeting with your spouse and you're going over, whether you own businesses or, you're leading a church or organizations, your family scheduled for the next week. It's just something that's a non-negotiable. We do it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fights and miscommunication that you can avoid if you just have that as a non-negotiable in your rhythm.
It's a basic business practice that works in everywhere we go do business. And then all of a sudden we've got this most important relationship that we have on this side, and we can't even sit down and talk for 5 minutes about what we have going on in our lives.
You got to do it.
Well, and I would say even for people who are listening who say, I can't even do a whole day, like start small, like do an hour, do like schedule something on a day where it's like, okay, maybe it's not a whole day for their jobs in the season or whatever, but start small and connect, because so often we're just passing each other,
Right.
especially when you have kids and jobs and economy and whatever it is. But just start small and then implement that and grow together.
One thing you didn't hit that we did every day, no matter if we had just the 2 kids with us or if we had 7, we would get up every morning at 6:30 and everybody was in the kitchen making breakfast together. By the time they were getting ready, we would eat breakfast together, we would read the word together, and then by the time they were ready to go to school, quick, everybody's cleaning up and then out the door. And then we would always have dinner together. So those are 2 spots in our family life.
Orange Bible too.
Orange Bible in the evening. So breakfast, making it together. There's something, it's not just mom's serving you.
Yeah.
It's you're getting up and you're playing your role in serving the family. And then they got to participate in even the cleanup. You're not leaving the dish here and you're not leaving the crumbs on the floor. You're cleaning them. And then at the end of the night, same thing, but just reverse. Like I would prep with the kids, and we have so many photos of them like sitting on the stove, like cooking and helping, and then what's being built in there is so much different. And I was thinking nearness and whatever, but I really think it's independence. Like you're training them personal life skill, like just super simple things, like, oh, I'm supposed to take care of my house, oh, I'm supposed to cook myself a meal, let's do this.
We'd have them set their own alarm. That's another thing. They set their own alarm, and the time they'd have to be in the kitchen by 6:30, no later than 6:30. Otherwise, they have wall squats, they have push-ups, different things.
Gonna do that.
But anyway, everybody's got their own
so
conviction. My point
true.
is like,
this is what worked for you guys.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
saw it and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was there ever a season where it felt like the boys weren't as committed to walking with Jesus as you guys wanted?
oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And they'd tell you the same thing.
Yep.
And one thing that we tried to always say though is, hey guys, this is your relationship with God. We have rhythms that we have in place that are non-negotiables in this house, and it's in the morning we're going to read together, at night we're going to read together, we're going to pray before you go to bed. But as you get older, you're going to have to work all this out on your own.
Yep.
And we really tried to not headlock and force feed them into a relationship with Jesus, more model it, have those rhythms, let them make their own decisions on how they want to do it.
And if we're super honest, there was like dual grace. What I mean by that is like God gave us the grace to bring people into our home, but on the flip side of that, then God extended grace to us with our kiddos, because now it piqued their interest because other people wanted to do it, not just mom and dad. So like, we have young men that are in the house that they looked up to, that they wanted to go fishing with, that now you want me to get in the Bible too, not just mom and dad. Oh, maybe I should. So it's just different.
That's a good word.
Which it's, you don't always have the benefit of that, but that, like, I felt like it was a supernatural grace. Like we were given the grace to extend it to people, to welcome them in the home, but then God allowed it to like help filter loving our kids and bringing them to Him a little bit more.
Really
It just
good.
flows downhill, right? And we need a village, so the more people that we have around them to help raise them in the right way, or at least the way that we believe to be right, and we've seen work, let's go.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So you planted this church. Now you've got a new church going. Let's talk about real estate just for a quick minute, because that's a big deal when we start saying, "Hey, let's go do something different." And we're gonna need some capital to invest in this. What do those conversations look like for you guys? And Have there ever been times where you're just not aligned on what to do next with that?
Several times, yeah. No, again, I commend my wife where she puts so much trust in me. She really does. And, part of it is it's the proof's in the pudding though too. It kind of is the same thing with the Bible. Like I'll tell people, don't take my word for it, man. You give it a shot.
Yeah.
Give your life to Christ, get into God's word, his playbook, and implement what he tells you to do. You see. It's kind of the same thing with real estate where I think she was very like, send it, let's go, I got you. But then when she starts seeing some of the fruit of that and the ROI and different stuff, I think she became more of a believer. But even just recently though, like I'm trying to invite her more into some of the details to help some more organization and structure and systems.
Doing it together.
Yeah. And so she's slowly getting more there. I'm a little weird. I would tell you this, when it comes to football and when it comes to real estate, they're healthy outlets for me. When you're leading an organization in ministry, there's so much coming at you and so much chaos. There's sometimes I call them healthy distractions.
Yep.
And that's the tension. I got to make sure it's not a unhealthy distraction at times, where I've kind of done that at times. Different businesses I've started, it's like, okay, I got to stay focused on my main task, but I do really enjoy learning. And I think it's helped, honestly, as an organizational leader, understanding that area of the world.
That's awesome.
For sure. Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, it's just been fun. It's been interesting, like the journey of just taking a risk like that. You never know. Like on the other side, like you guys know, you're in the middle of it right now. And so it's like, okay, like what's going to happen? And then you'll have a bump in the road and God just gives you an open door to figure it out. He's got some, like there's funny stories about our house in Mexico that just I wish I had on video. Like things that you just could never imagine happening. You're like, okay, we're okay. Like,
I'll give you the 30 seconds. Do you have time for the 30 seconds?
Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Okay, so we're literally, by God's grace, for 10 years, one of my key mentors in my life would invite us to his place on the beach in Puerto Vallarta. And so gracious. Well, one of the times, Denise and I are finishing up a trip there. It's our second to last day. We're walking on the beach, and I see this huge condo going up. It's brand new. I'm like, sick. And I'm like, I have swimming shorts on. That's it. And flip-flops.
No flip-flops.
No flip-flops. I was barefoot. I'm like, all right, let's send it. See what happens. And I go in there and I talk to my man Pierre, and he's the sales guy.
His new
I'm like,
best
bro.
friend.
I'm like, and we hit it off, he goes, I was like, do you have any units left? He's like, nah, man, sorry. He's like, but there's going to be a brand new project in a couple of years, 20 minutes walk up the beach. He's like, what do you think? I'm like, all right. So like we looked at this unit and dude, if you ever buy pre-construction, you just never know what the heck they're going to do, especially in a foreign country,
right?
And we had to liquidate some stuff, and we're like, all right, let's send it. So, but when we moved in, I'm like texting and online buying stuff all in Spanish. I'm at the Walmart, like cramming a refrigerator in a rental and driving like in the streets of Mexico, like I'm taking it out of the rental car, like wrangling it in the elevator to get up to the, to the condo. It was, but again, it's like, we got to do it. I'm stubborn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? But God's been so gracious with it. It adds stress to your life, but it's fun. I don't know. Maybe, and that's part of it.
It's a healthy distraction.
It's a healthy distraction. It's fun, man.
Yep.
Yeah. It gives you a little goal. It keeps you, continue to move forward and
especially together, like in marriage,
sure.
There's so many things that you do different in the way of the work world. So when you have something to work on together, it just builds something. And even if it's stressful, like it helps you learn how to iron things
when the
out.
power was out and the hurricane was coming
It was 100
right at
degrees.
us.
We had to get a flight. All the flights were booked. It
I'm
was just
putting
fun.
the bed together and the hurricane's coming. Demoni's like, I had no idea the hurricane. I don't have social media. I know that. She's like, there's a hurricane coming right now. And I'm like, oh no. I'm getting online and there's no flights out. We had to fly to like California or
Who
something.
goes during hurricane season without looking at the
crazy.
weather map?
I mean, you guys do.
I never
We
look
do.
at the weather.
Yeah.
Well, we were coming from Colombia, so we kind of had an excuse.
So crazy. Anyway,
That's awesome.
it's been fun.
Yeah, pray and obey is one of the things you guys
Yeah.
always say. Pray and obey. Let the Lord sort out everything else in between as long as you guys are obedient during that time.
What's he inviting us into in this season? So one of our number one prayers.
Yep. What's another piece, or what is the one piece of advice that you would give to people that are in a tough season of their marriage, or even maybe considering divorce,
Yep.
on how to stick with it?
Yeah. man, one of the things I think that has really helped us is learning to appreciate the differences, and so
good.
I hate the terminology irreconcilable differences. It's untrue. It's I'm unwilling and I'm operating out of pride instead of willing to yield and walking in humility, and so there's just, when you say that, it's really just an excuse to remain prideful or operate from my hurt, from my pain, from my insecurities, from my fear, and so I'm just making an excuse to not want to yield. And so that to me is such a hard thing to say, because some people have been really wounded. Some people have been through a real lot. But at the same time, I've watched God enough to see miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle in marriages. And so if you can start with the little things in appreciating differences, whether it's he puts the toothpaste on wrong or the shower has whatever on the wall, the things, the little things.
Yep.
If you can start to appreciate the little things, then when the big things happen, you just know, okay, you want to work something out of me in learning how to yield in humility, right? And you're going to use this one to do it. That's the one thing that people don't realize. God allows two sinners under one roof for a reason, so that we grow into God's image.
Yep.
We become more like Christ when we learn to walk in humility. Well, how are we going to do that? Be with people who sin,
Yep.
so that you learn
Right,
to
annoy
yield.
you.
Yeah.
And so the more that we're willing to realize that, and God just empowers us to walk more humbly, And so there's times when I just would rather like run or smack him in the face or get my shoe out and my kid, and vice versa. He'd be like, "You're really annoying me right now." There's a lot of times where we could be there and stay there. But if we can really reel back in our emotion, surrender it to God and be like, okay, I want your perspective. I want your heart. I want to see him as your son. I want to learn to appreciate how he's so different in this area than I am, because this is really hard. Something shifts in us. And so that's what my biggest challenge would be for most marriages.
So good, babe.
It's so hard.
I could listen
It's
to you
hard.
all day.
Same.
I was going to
love
say humility. The only thing I would add to this is it's the human condition, man. At the end of the day, God created us with a God-shaped hole in our heart.
Yep.
Only He can fulfill.
Yeah.
And the problem is you get in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you're going, okay, she's added some weight. He's out. He's been busy at work. I need someone to love. So there's always going to be someone better out there. There's always going to be something, out there. The problem is then you go get that, and then that wears off. And then, now you're looking to something else. And until we finally come to this place of surrender, God, you're like, I need you and you alone. And we say this a lot.
Yeah.
Christ, you're enough. You're enough. And whether she's fulfilling me or not, I have you, I'm good. And we've had to have seasons of our life where, I'm off, I'm a jerk or whatever. Christ has had to been enough for her.
Yep.
And vice versa, where she's like, I don't know, I ain't feeling her or whatever. It's like, okay, well, am I going to go out and get something else? Well, you might. And someone said something a long time ago. It was, what did he say? He said, you see a chick at the gym or whatever, and he says the phrase you need to tell yourself is, then what?
Then what?
That was it. Then what? 5 minutes of 50 minutes, whatever, of pleasure for 50 years of pain.
Yeah.
So
It's like character.
it's so you just think about, like, I just look at the human condition, and anytime we're going that way, man, you're gonna be it's only be a matter of time, and you're looking for something else. So I'll shut up with that. But
No, that's good. I mean,
When you said the words pray and obey, I feel like sometimes people will ask the question, like, how do you know what to do next? Like in your marriage, in the season, we've moved 23 times in 9 years. Like, how did you know where to go, when, what to do, all those things? And honestly, that's like in all of our years of being married together, it really has come down to something as simple as
good,
like get with God, pray, ask him to lead you and guide you, and then whatever he says, just do it, because it's going to be the best case scenario, And so that's where that simple terminology comes from.
Yep.
We've learned the hard way. Like when we didn't do that, it didn't work out so well. But as simple as, let's just get on our knees together, let's just pray about this thing together, and then suddenly there's like the clouds lifted. The next step is there, whatever that should be.
I have a quick question though, because I could sit here and just, you guys are so, like, it's been so rich, and you guys, I just love you as people anyway, but just knowing like you're some of our biggest mentors. And so thinking back to all the times where you've had to grow, chosen to grow and learn and respect your husband, and the times where, sometimes it maybe didn't make sense. I think of the woman who, for her husband, I mean, he's not leading her in Christ. And it's very difficult to submit, say that word again, but to submit. And so practically, what does that look like for you to get with the Lord and then come back and still show him honor and respect when maybe you've been hurt?
Yeah, that's when you have to take your husband out of the equation. Because if he's in the equation, then he's not operating from God's Spirit and he's not willing to yield or lead, the way that God's inviting him to, you have to take him out of the equation. What I mean by that is you're doing it as unto the Lord and not man. Because then your obedience is to the Lord, and it's not because he's worthy of it. It's not because he's worth it. It's not because he's deserves it, maybe, but God does.
Yeah.
God's inviting us into the role as a wife, and so when you look at what God gives us, it's easier to go, man, I can do this for the Lord, not because he's worth it, but then you see the fruit. Then you start to see the fruit of it, walking in obedience simply because God said, which is so hard for some people because I don't even have a relationship with God, but watch God show up. And maybe that's the very thing that speaks to your husband. Your attitude's changing, your tone is changing, your way you're serving him is changing. And then as you're being transformed, the husband looks on and goes, what is happening over there?
1 Peter 3.
You just literally took the
Won
thought
the
out.
word.
Yeah.
Won him without a word.
Well, that's what was happening in the church. The reason he wrote that is because a lot of these wives, they were asking the question, I'm committing my life to Christ. This knucklehead is out here doing his own thing. What do I do?
Isn't getting better.
Right. And that's what Peter said. And Peter
Frustrated,
said, he's like, hey, win him without a word. Yeah. And we saw that. I mean, several stories we've seen of wives that would literally, first thing they do, here's a practical. You want a practical? The minute you get out of bed, drop to your knees and pray for that knucklehead, alcoholic, abusive, lost husband.
Adulteress. I mean, that's our story.
Throw it all in there.
Yeah.
Get on your knees and pray. And
you did.
And see what God might want to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys are a perfect example of that. You're some of our best friends that we celebrate God's grace in your life constantly.
So
and look at us. This year's, how many years later, we're sitting here together celebrating God's grace and we point directly to him.
Yep.
And
But you guys had to participate in that.
Remembering back to who you see him, when you first got married, who did
That's
God reveal
good.
him to be then and start praying those things in, or destiny. What does God say for your spouse?
Yeah.
Ask the Lord who he is. Ask the Lord what he has over him and start speaking it out loud. Start praying it out loud and watch your attitude toward them change, but then also them, change. So
Big piece of that's the healing aspect of what needs to take place during that time. So maybe just very quickly, what does that look like for you guys? Because that's everything, right? If let's say you're going to go out and you're going to go find that next thing, 5 minutes, then what? You're just going to take each one of these past pains into another relationship. If there's no healing that takes place throughout that entire process of how did I get here? You're just starting back over with another mess. So maybe briefly just talk about that healing process and what that looks like for you guys.
It's hard to really describe, if I'm honest, but over the years, with humility and patience and connection with God and his word and his spirit, he's just done a beautiful thing. And it's hard to pinpoint. I don't know if it was some radical, all of a sudden some blockage in my heart is just unloaded. There's a lot of deep rejection. There's a lot of different stuff that we've worked through, that we've been vulnerable with each other on certain key areas, that we've forgiven one another. We've given grace. We've helped, by God's grace, facilitate, being fully vulnerable, but also trust one another to not take that and stomp on it.
Good.
And I think that's a big deal. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
that is a
speaking
big
from
deal.
my standpoint. I mean, I don't know what you'd add to that.
I think that's really tricky too. It's until you get into a conversation counseling somebody, you can't really know what you mean when you say what you just said. But when someone's fully vulnerable and then you use it against them, oh, this hurt when you, and then you start picking that apart or saying they're weak or I can't believe you expect that, or you're basically really just layering them up harder, making them have a harder heart or causing it to be more hardened. But that willingness to be vulnerable is so key. And with any quote unquote heart ministry, the process of repentance is in there, right? If you're not even sure the word repentance is really truly genuinely confessing your sin to God and then turning away from it. And so whether I've been offended by something he's done, I've taken up. So a lot of times we like to look at the offender and we like to be like, you're the idiot. You did this to me. I can't believe you hurt me like that. You had the affair. You did the whatever damage. You sold the whatever. You bought the whatever. And we're angry or we're bitter or we're whatever. And we want them to ask for forgiveness, or we want to hold an account over their head. Well,
oh gosh,
yeah, and that's so damaging to marriages. But the reality is I have to own my offense. I have to be like, man, that hurt so bad, Lord. Like, I can't believe this happened. He did this, she did that. Here's what's going on in my heart. I feel angry. I feel bitter. I have resentment. I don't even want to talk to them. You got to be that raw with God. What happens? I'm confessing it to him. Please forgive me. A lot of people like to be like, oh, I'm so sorry to their spouse. But until you go to God and realize, no, that offended God. The one who created you didn't create you to operate that way. So when I'm offensive to God, his spirit doesn't move through me so freely to my spouse.
Wow.
So now I have to own it and be like, oh my goodness, God, I was just offended. You've forgiven me for everything. And I was just offended because he spent money. Oh my goodness. Like until I'm willing to own that sin, I'm going to continue to have a bitter heart, and it's going to continue to be in our marriage. So heart ministry in general is a process, but we cannot forget the part of repentance on our own behalf. A lot of times we expect it from everybody else, but we don't want to own it. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, that participation is huge. It's that God's going to reveal it.
Yeah.
You've got to deal with it with him. He's going to be there for the dealing part of it as well. And then he's the one that's going to help you heal from it.
Right.
And when you go down that path with him along all three of those is when you truly get true freedom from that conversation.
Well, and that's where
humility.
It's so you're right on, and that's where humility though is so big in a marriage because both can happen. She can ask the Lord to deal with her heart while still being loving and calm when just expressing her heart.
Yep.
What you said hurt me. I just wanted you to know. I'm not trying to point my finger, but I just want to be honest with where I'm at right now.
Yep.
What is that? That is humility. But it's also clarity.
Yeah.
Like I need to be a big boy and grow up and go, she's able to express what hurt her. And she did it in a very tactful and humble, in a very approachable way. Who am I to then lash back out?
Right.
I need to also be humble and go, you know what, that hurts, but I'm glad you expressed what hurt you. And that's tough for me to hear. I apologize, but now I have better information. I didn't even know that hurt her, or I did, and now I'm able to repent. God, will you forgive me? I can't believe I acted that way towards her. Yeah. She now has to go vertical and deal with that as well. Now it's a win-win. But it's humility, to me, God-given humility, that we're able to have that clear communication.
So good.
It's so good. And one thing you said earlier was, and something that we've learned really, is when you blow it and you hurt each other, and it's one thing to hurt each other behind closed doors or with friends. We've been in conversations when we've all said different things.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, oh crap. It's kind of embarrassing to be like, oh shoot, but then in front of your kids, both of you guys, we started this conversation with you guys saying what you learned growing up. And so this is just something that's really important to us, because for the first 15 years of marriage, 16 years of marriage, we didn't get it right. And sometimes we still don't. But when we blow it now and we hurt each other's feelings, we can, ask each other for forgiveness and then do it to our kids. And you mentioned that earlier. We've learned through you guys because we've done things even on the way to go do good things.
Right.
Yeah.
Or on a vacation. We can have it.
We're going to spend time together.
Yes. Or on the way to church. I mean, come on. Yeah. And so then we blow it. And then I don't want ever our kids to say, gosh, what hypocrites.
Yeah.
Like these people are such hypocrites. But so we just get to practice it all the time in front of our kids, saying, oh my gosh, can you please forgive me? Because I don't want them to take that into their marriage.
Right. And not know how to repent themselves, right?
Yeah.
So
Humility.
You guys have been
Humility is the word,
amazing role models to us, some of our closest friends. Super grateful for this conversation.
Likewise.
Love the way that you lead, the way that you guys just both minister to so many people. Help out just anybody that's willing to listen. We wouldn't be where we're at without you guys. So super grateful for this conversation.
Feelings mutual, yeah.
And love you guys. And I want everybody to know the people you just heard are the exact same people that you will see on the stage and everywhere they're at. The most consistent people that I've ever met. Love you guys for what you're doing. And what you,
Wow, what an incredible story that we just got to experience. We hope you were just as moved as we were listening to that story. Drop a comment below and tell us what you learned and how the story impacted you. We can't wait to share our next story with you, so be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next episode of Making Marriage Great Again. We love you. We're praying for you. We can't wait to see you soon.